Good morning and welcome to the November 21st SCAAC meeting, School Curriculum Assessment and Accountability Council. We're glad to see you all virtually on this fall day, the week of Thanksgiving. And we have a lot to be thankful for. And one of my things I'm thankful for is that many of you have shown up. And more importantly, I'm thankful for Melissa Chandler, who keeps us all on our toes at KDE. And I'm going to turn it over to Melissa to do roll call.
All righty. Thank you so much. And good morning, everyone. When I call your name, if you'll just state your name and say that you're here for me. Artavia Ackland. Heather Aldridge. Deborah Atherton.
Here.
Houston Barber. Renee Boss. Martha Emmons. Chuck Fletcher.
Chuck Fletcher's here.
Janabeth Francis.
Janabeth Francis here.
Leslie Jeffries. Lisa Keir. Brenda McGowan. Kristen Putnam. Jason Reeves. Allison Tammy. Jenny Uri. And Henry Webb. Okay, so it doesn't look like we have a quorum just yet, Janabeth. I will go over just a few things before we get started about conducting virtual meetings. And Janabeth, I will watch the attendance and I will let you know as soon as we have a quorum so we can get those minutes approved. So a few reminders about conducting virtual meetings. Please remember to that this meeting must comply with the requirements of the Open Meetings Act. Making sure that we didn't have anybody else come in. It looks like we had a couple more that came in, so I'll make sure to get those. The meeting must comply with the requirements of the Open Meetings Act, and the public may view this meeting via the link provided in the public agenda, which was posted on the KDE website. SCAAC members, please ensure that your video is streaming and we can see you throughout the duration of the meeting. Additionally, just mute your microphone unless you're speaking, and all discussions must be broadcast to the public. So each time you do speak during the meeting, just unmute your microphone, state your name, and then take a short pause. That'll just give our software time to recognize you. And then for agenda items that require a formal vote, we'll conduct a roll call to record the vote of each member. I don't anticipate any of those today. And then please silence or turn off any electronic devices that could cause disruption to your sound feed. I will be taking minutes and I will share those with the general public on the KDE website when those are available. So Janabeth, I'll turn the meeting over to you and I'll check attendance one more time.
Thank you. And I did see that we had a few more members join in. So keep us posted. For now, sure. we will skip item 3. Okay. And if Robin Kinney is on, Robin had some greetings.
Now, I think I know she was kind of held up until 9:45. So okay. At 9:45, we're anticipating her to log on and say hello.
Perfect. I will make a note of that. And what we will do is move right on into the proposed amendments to 704 KAR 3305, the minimum requirements for high school graduation, as well as 704 KAR 3095, use of a multi-tiered system of support for K-12. Mickey Ray, Sarah Peace, both from the Office of Teaching and Learning, are here today. And our focus for this session is really how can educational leaders support increased student access to individualized instruction, assessment, and intervention. Mickey and Sarah.
Thank you so much, Chair, and thank you, members of the committee. We are very happy to be joining you today. And I did want to make note of a slight change to the agenda. So the Kentucky Board of Education has determined that they will not be moving forward with proposed amendments to 704 KAR 3305 this month. And so at this time, that item will be removed. But Sarah and I are coming to you today to discuss the proposed amendments to 704 KAR 3095. And I want to tell you a little bit about the context for these amendments before we move into the actual sort of technical changes to the regulation. But as a part of the Read to Succeed Act, so Senate Bill 9 of 2022, the Kentucky Board of Education was asked to further define MTSS, the multi-tiered system of support for our state. And so that became the legal basis for us to bring forward these proposed amendments to the KBE for your feedback today. And traditionally, this regulation has been entitled the use of response to intervention for kindergarten through grade 3, but we are proposing amendments that would allow us to broaden the title of this regulation to the use of MTSS, the multi-tiered system of supports. So if you look at the next slide, we are asking you today to think about when implementing MTSS across a district for K-12, how can educational leaders, including those at the KDE that are serving you in local schools and districts, how can we increase our supports and also access to individualized instruction, assessment, and intervention? You know, one of the major shifts is that we are encouraging the field to tailor that instruction and specifically intervention supports to meet the individual student needs. So not looking for something that is sort of a cookie cutter model for intervention, but truly tailored to the needs of individual students within our classrooms. So on the next slide, I believe we have, yes, the associated statutes. Thank you, Sarah. And so it begins with that connection to 158.305, which, as it states, requires the board to promulgate regulations to further define a multi-tiered system of supports. That second statute, which gives us the legal basis for this work, is connected to high school specifically. So developing accelerated learning opportunities for students who are exhibiting academic deficiencies prior to their graduation. The 156.488 further allows us to provide supports to students and enhance courses for middle school and high school. But that last one is very important. So 158.791, that is what allows us to provide those MTSS supports across the full K through 12 spectrum. So those are our foundational statutes for moving forward with the amendments to this proposed regulation. On the next slide, I wanted to say, so these amendments were informed not only by the work that has occurred with our policy advisor, Sarah Peace, but our MTSS coordinators at the state. So Dr. Melissa Wainwright and Jan Sellers have provided feedback and language to build out this amended regulation. It also has gone before our cross-agency team that includes members of the Office of Special Education and Early Learning, as well as the Office of Continuous Improvement and Support. So this is really a cross-agency collaboration to bring forward this reg for your review today. And what we're going to do now is walk through the changes, the amendments to the sections of the regulation. And section 1 houses all of the definitions. And you can see there are 10 items there, but I want to focus on specifically 6 through 9. So previously, there was a definition for response to intervention, but we are building this out to include and to further define the full system. So I want you to have your eyes on that specific definition, as well as the changes that were made to the definitions for Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3. So we'll look first at MTSS, and you can see here the reg is proposing a definition around MTSS specifically, meaning a multi-level prevention system designed to maximize student achievement and social and behavioral competencies through an integration of differentiated universal instruction, assessment, and intervention. I'm going to read that one more time because it's the foundational piece of the regulation. So multi-tiered system of supports means a multi-level prevention system designed to maximize student achievement and social and behavioral competencies through an integration of differentiated universal instruction, assessment, and intervention. And Sarah, if you can go to the next one. So now we'll look at the actual definitions of the tiered delivery model. So tier 1 universal instruction means instruction provided to all students based on the state's academic standards as set forth in those regulations and within KRS 158.6451. And that reg establishes the larger goals for education across the Commonwealth. And then for tier 2 targeted intervention, that would mean supplemental evidence-based intervention that is in addition to and in alignment with what's happening within tier 1 universal instruction. And this is for students who are identified by universal screening and diagnostic assessment data as being at risk for not meeting grade level academic or behavioral benchmarks. And then tier 3 would further provide students with, in addition to tier 1 universal instruction and that tier 2 targeted intervention, the student would be provided with evidence-based intervention services, again, based on diagnostic assessment and progress monitoring data with an intensity and duration matched to that individual student's academic or behavioral needs. So those 4 definitions are really critical to the proposed amendments for 3095 and to really challenge the field to move beyond just the response to intervention, but also looking at all of those targeted layers of support that would be critical for students to meet grade level learning expectations. The only changes to section 2 are here for you. And so if you look at the first subsection, it says each local school district shall implement a comprehensive MTSS for K through 12 that includes a tiered delivery system with a continuum of differentiated tier 1 universal instruction, tier 2 targeted intervention, and tier 3 intensive intervention. And that would be delivered by individuals most qualified to provide those services in order to maximize student academic and behavioral outcomes. So previously, this language was connected to response to intervention specifically. So now we have been able to build out that comprehensive MTSS model here within section 2. And the only other change to this section was connected to monitoring and progress reports. And so you can see there, we did add the word progress just to make that clear. So individual student progress reports shared with parents of each student in K-12. So that's an important link back to the full system that summarizes the student's academic skills, behavior, and intervention plans and services being delivered. So we think that communication to parents and families, we know this is already happening across districts and schools within our state, but it was important to formalize that within the new version of the regulation. And then section 3 is dealing with the reporting requirements back to the Kentucky Department of Education. So you can see there, the only thing that has been added there in the first portion is the October 1. So each local district shall submit to the KDE by October 1 of each year, evidence demonstrating this district-wide implementation of a comprehensive MTSS. That evidence should align to section 2 of this regulation. So looking at both the academic, social, and behavioral supports that are being provided to students. And then it also would include very specifically the evidence of implementation for K-3 early literacy as required by the separate statute in 158.305. So now we're happy to take any questions that the committee may have regarding 3095. And again, I do have Sarah Peace with me. She is the policy advisor in the Office of Teaching and Learning. And so she may be able to support us as well if there are more granular questions.
Do you have a sense of how many districts are using some form of MTSS? Is this going to be a big lift, or is this something most districts are already doing?
We believe that this is something that districts are already doing. You know, there were many statutory requirements and just best practice that educators are implementing through the use of universal screening, diagnostic assessment to really determine the best next steps for students, both in instruction and intervention. So I think this is simply formalizing the process that is already occurring across districts across the Commonwealth.
Other questions from the committee?
Janet Beth, I'm not on the committee, but can I ask a question?
Sure.
So let me first say I'm in Fayette County, and Fayette County has an amazing MTSS department. It's outstanding. That said, sometimes I'm hearing that there are levels of support that some schools, quote unquote, desire. So my question is, does SBDM or does the school have any say in how much they can or cannot receive? Or is it the district saying you should have this embedded and this is what we're going to do?
So I think it would be in consultation with both. That is the importance of the regulation. So the regulation establishes the minimum requirements. So all students are afforded supports for Tier 1 universal instruction, Tier 2 intervention, and then that higher level of Tier 3 supports as well. And so that would be that's a non-negotiable, and that was already in regulation as well. But now, as we're thinking about building out these systems, districts are at varying degrees of implementation of MTSS. But I think that, to your point, that the responsibility of both the district leaders is to inform principals and to work with councils to ensure that they're providing the very best supports for students in the academic as well as social and behavioral space.
And I think section 3, to go to Penny's question, because it's a lot about governance. This is new. You've not asked necessarily at the department level that we give you evidence of that district-wide implementation. But now with this, I think that will start making sure there's some oversight and hopefully some equitable decisions based on resources as well when we move forward.
That's a great point. Thank you, Chair.
And just as you all considering where we put this evidence demonstrating implementation, I know you try to think about different tools that are being used. The district improvement plan would be a logical place as you think about where schools could have to share information. And I don't know if that's possible, but a lot of what's in that plan is about what we're going to do to help students succeed academically. It seems like a good place to document some of your evidence.
We will definitely take that note, and I agree with you. I think that is the most logical place, and so it would be a matter of us collaborating with the Office of Continuous Improvement and Support to make sure that those components are added in future phases of that work.
And I get the advantage of seeing all the great things that Mickey's group does with curriculum. And one of those is they're starting to do a lot of neat things where districts can see what everybody else is doing. So I'm just going to throw this out there. We are always looking for which intervention is most successful. So as this gets up and going, some collection of interventions that are evidence-based and used. If somebody runs across something that's a really great success in math, we all want to hear it, especially at
Absolutely.
the Tier 2 and 3 level. So
absolutely. And that is something that we right now, in terms of our voluntary survey, we're looking specifically at the high quality instructional resource adoptions for Tier 1. But I think we do have a responsibility to the state and to increase conversations around database decision making and what is working for students, not only at Tier 1, but for Tier 2 and Tier 3 as well. So we'll be very happy to share that as we move forward in the work.
And please pass along, I'm not as familiar with the MTSS people doing the work as I am with the folks on the curriculum side, yes. But the newsletter is great and all the information coming out. And we are in the right spot to have formalized our definitions, I think. So I'm excited that this reg is going through.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you so much. We're going to stay in the Office of Teaching and Learning and move to the Read to Succeed Act. And this is the implementation of high quality instructional resources. Christy Biggerstaff is joining us. And our big question here is what resources are available to help districts in the implementation of Senate Bill 9 from 22, which is the Read to Succeed Act, and Senate Bill 156 from 23. Good morning, Christy.
Good morning. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Council, for having me today. I'm always excited to talk about literacy and the Read to Succeed Act, and I want to share some resources that we have for districts and schools throughout the state. So I'll jump right into it. I have spoke to this council before about the Read to Succeed Act, but just kind of wanted to go back through the many moving pieces and parts that are in place within the Read to Succeed Act. And of course, as you know, it is there to help support evidence-based early literacy instruction throughout the Commonwealth. We truly want to invest in educators and, of course, increase student success in reading throughout the many moving pieces and parts that are in place. So the first piece that I'll talk to you about is the screener and diagnostic assessments. Of course, as you know, districts and schools have to give a screener within the first 45 days for kindergarten students and within the first 30 days for grades 1 through 3. We're in the process of actually a submission and review for our screener and diagnostic list that is on our webpage. And we have approved, valid, and reliable assessments there for districts and schools to choose from. That review process is going to end at the end of November. And then December and January, we're going to be looking at those submissions of new assessments to be added to the list. And then those will be posted in February. And I believe the date's February the 19th. So I wanted to make this council aware of that process that's going on. So those are there for you to look at. We have one-pagers on our diagnostics and our universal screeners. We also have an Excel document so you can see all of those in one place so you can gather that information and see what would best fit your students' needs. The next thing I want to talk about today is the reading improvement plan. So any student that is identified not meeting progress toward proficient performance in reading has to have a reading improvement plan. And we wanted to give districts and schools a template that they could utilize just to see what best practice is. And we have that on our website as well, and that's linked in the PowerPoint there. You do not have to use the template that we have provided, but we wanted to provide one to show you some of the best practices. And we talked about MTSS earlier, and it fits and aligns very well with the Read to Succeed Act and utilizing the reading improvement plan and all of those practices that are listed there. And then also students that are identified for not meeting proficiency need to have a read at home plan. We've also provided that for districts and schools to utilize. The Read at Home Family Plan Guide has tons of activities that parents can use with their children at home to support their reading skill development. We wanted this to be accessible for all families. There's nothing that they have to purchase. There's nothing they have to cut out, glue together, staple. We wanted it to be easy to implement. So there's a lot of great information in that Read at Home Family Guide that talks about the 5 pillars of literacy, and it talks about the definitions of those, and really helps to guide parents to help support their child at home. And we also have a Spanish version on our webpage as well. We also partnered with the Kentucky Collaborative for Families and Schools to develop guidance for educators and administrators for high-impact research-based family engagement best practices, and that is also on our webpage for our district administrators and educators to look through and implement as needed. So one of the biggest things that people have been talking about here lately in terms of the Read to Succeed Act is the change with that Senate Bill 156 brought. And that change was in KRS 158.305, and that is part of the Read to Succeed Act. And it's talking about the adoption and implementation of high quality instructional resources. We all in education are very acronym heavy. We call them HQIRs. So I want to talk to you just a few minutes about this change. It was a one-word change, but a very high impact change. And it states that each superintendent shall adopt a common comprehensive reading program. And that used to say may. So now it is shall adopt a common comprehensive reading program that's determined by the department to be reliable and valid and aligned to reading and writing standards. And then that is to be implemented for kindergarten through grade 3 for all schools or subset of schools. So that change has to be that change in your district, that adoption has to take place by July 1st, 2024. And you think, well, that's a long period of time. We've got some time. But in all actuality, that is not a lot of time to adopt a comprehensive reading program. So we're really trying to talk about this change, really push districts to start those conversations if they do not have an HQIR in place for reading. And because that process takes some time and it takes a lot of thought and a lot of application. So we do have some resources available for districts to assist them in that adoption process. The Reading and Writing Instructional Resources Consumer Guide is there to help assist districts in getting that completed. And it's really wanting them to select HQIRs that are aligned to the Kentucky academic standards for reading and writing, and then, of course, fit the context of their local communities. But we really, within that Reading and Writing Consumer Guide, it talks about green rated resources on ed reports. And that is what we are wanting them to adopt, a green rated resource. That essentially is our list. When it talks in the law about the department reliable and valid instructional resources, that list for the department is that ed reports. The green rated resources on ed reports. And we also recommend that districts consider both, and this is, twofold, an explicit, systematic, cumulative, multisensory reading foundational skills supplement resource, along with a rich knowledge building curriculum for Tier 1 instruction. And we go on to say that we really like the core knowledge, Amplify CKLA, the EL education, and the wit and wisdom for that comprehensive. But again, green rated resources is what is required by law. So we have all of those on our website. I've included additionally a frequently asked questions document. A lot of people reach out, and we felt the need to compile most of those common questions in a document. That's very useful if you just wanted a quick answer. Of course, I'm always here and available to you, to districts and schools. I want to support you. I want to help you in implementing all of the changes, and that's the Reach Succeed Act is bringing, and it's necessary changes and good changes for our state, and very excited about what districts are implementing and utilizing. So we also have a fairly new webpage, the early literacy webpage, and that has a lot of different documents for districts and schools to utilize. We have an entire webpage devoted to structured literacy, and all of the components of structured literacy. So I hope that you will check all of those out. We also have a early literacy newsletter that we send out that points to all of these resources. And again, just wanting to help support our districts and schools. So I will stop there and see if the council has any kind of questions for me.
Any questions for Christy?
Yes, Chuck Fletcher, like to ask a question. Christy, thank you for sharing and explaining some of the details that's going on the reading improvement plan. I'm interested, and maybe it's already on the website, so I want to ask this question anyway. On the reading, on the home plan family guide, how do you measure whether parents are doing, being a part of doing this reading program in the home, especially if you got parents that cannot read, and you got parents that are maybe don't have a GED or graduation from a high school? How do we know and measure what's going on?
It's a great question. And illiteracy, especially in our families, is a problem throughout the state of Kentucky. And I get that question from school districts a lot of times that are reaching out to say, do you know of any supports that we can help our parents? And really, honestly, we can't measure that. It is up to our schools and our educators to really help develop and support those relationships with families and to help them as much as possible. But really, there's not a measurement within the family guide to ensure that that is taking place. Mickey, I saw you pop on. Do you want to add anything to that?
Just one small thing, and Mr. Fletcher, I have to say it is lovely to see you. We were together in Anderson County for many years, and it's a joy to share your space this morning. But I wanted to add that so the parents are also part and a very important part of the reading improvement team, and so I think that the school would be able to identify maybe additional supports, not to require that of parents and families, but if they are seeking more information to address the literacy needs within their home, I think that there are organizations that do exist in our state that could provide supports for parents. But I love Christy's point that the purpose of this is really just to provide a resource to parents and families as they are able to allow the student to practice those skills at home and have additional success within the literacy space at school as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mickey.
I think, Brenda, I would just say, I'll tell you, one of the things we did in our reading improvement plans is we left space for parents to set a goal. So as we were talking through the plan and sharing the Read at Home guide, we had space on our reading improvement plan where we could add a goal that the parents might set in hopes of helping them. But I do agree that we have a lot to work on with making sure parents are valid partners. Brenda, I think you had your hand up next.
Oh, thank you. I'm wondering why the regulation says superintendent shall adopt instead of school district shall adopt. And I'm not as current on KRS changes as I had been. It may tie back to something else that wasn't showing in the snippet on the screen.
I'll defer that question right back to Mickey Ray because she's knowledgeable there.
Thank you so much, Christy. So there was a change. So within it's KRS 160.345, there was a shift in the General Assembly's language to have the superintendent now oversee curriculum and instruction across the district, but it does include language around consultation with local boards and school-based decision-making councils. So the goal is that there still is conversation and collaboration in the process, but now it is the superintendent who has the ultimate authority over that selection. And so now that language is paralleled within this language is found now in KRS 158.305, but those two statutes now are aligned.
Thank you, Mickey.
Penny, you wanted to share a comment or question?
Just a quick question. I want to go back to, I appreciate Mr. Fletcher pouncing on the family part, because I want to piggyback a little bit on what he said, not just about acknowledging we do have families with adult non-readers, but that's also a pride issue. So you're not always going to be able to identify. They're not going to come to the school and say, hey, I can't read. Right. So that brings me to the first question, to the original question. This Read at Home Plan Family Guide, is there any scaffolding, front loading for the parents, or do we just send this home and say, hey, here's a guide, read it, bring it, this is how you can help your kid? Or is there an event? Is there something that the families get before this gets sent home? And to that end, it's done in Spanish, but Fayette County's got over 100 languages. So my question is, if someone says, can I have this in another language, who's responsible for that, and can it get done?
Thank you so much for your question. So to answer your first question, the event really that takes place that Jana Beth really alluded to too is the reading improvement plan. Families are an integral part of that reading improvement plan team. So it's really imperative that schools make sure that they have a seat at the table and they are a part of that team in law and regulation. So, that is the event. They get to come together because, again, they are imperative. They know their child, they know their student. They are an important part of that team to help set goals, to ensure that that student reaches proficiency. As far as the different languages, I've had districts to reach out wanting different languages. And right now, the only one, of course, that I said that we have is Spanish version. I know different districts utilize different companies and applications that they can put that in to get that into a different language. And I talk to districts all the time, and they said they've taken the Read at Home plan and then put that into a different, an application that they have or a company that they utilize, and translate that to the language that they need.
Penny and I were on the same train of thought because I so love the Read at Home plan. I just want to really commend it. In fact, we had several schools asked to hand it out to all their K-3 students at parent-teacher conference. And I appreciate Spanish. I wish the State Department would adopt top 5 languages. We'll have documents translated into top 5. That would help all of us who have a large number of languages in our district. But I will say, to Penny's point, the plan, the Read at Home guide, is pretty comprehensive. And so one of the strategies we had our teachers use was to put a Post-it note in an area that we may want to focus in on. If we were going to suggest that the student needed work in fluency, let's post-it that section of the Read at Home guide and make sure we go over that with parents. But these reading improvement plans should be almost wrapping up or finished in a district. And so if you're curious about it, you might find an elementary principal or teacher and ask them. They should be involved. But we so appreciate all the work. I think it is steps towards making sure everybody is proficiency at 3rd grade. Any other questions for Christy?
Yes, I have one other one. I think one thing that, as I was listening to you all, I think it's a good way to get the community involved by maybe possibly rewarding those students and their parents, like a certificate or recognition or something for their accomplishment from that 1st to the 3rd grade. So that's a good way to get the community involved as well. Maybe organizations, service organizations, etc., to be involved to reward those parents when they get to a certain point, and let the school decide that, and the clubs could give those awards.
It's a great point, Mr. Fletcher. Great point, and I will take note of that for sure. Thank you.
Okay, well, Christy, we appreciate it. Do check out the Read at Home plan if you've never seen it. It is very comprehensive. If you know of a child under the age of 9, print it off and give it to their grown-up that they trust. So it's a great tool for you to use. Thank you again, Christy. And we're going to move on to hearing from Karen Dodd and Penny Christian. And this is about the Kentucky United We Learn convening. And between our 2 meetings, the actual convening took place. And so I'm looking forward to hearing an update.
Thank you, Chair Francis. Hello, everyone. Good morning. I'm Karen Dodd. I'm the Chief Performance Officer at the Kentucky Department of Education, and also lead from a KDE perspective, the United We Learn Council. Our question for you all today is, how well does the work of the Kentucky United We Learn Council align with the new indicators, specifically English language learners, post-secondary readiness, and graduation rate? Whoops. I have a sensitive mouse here. So as Jana Beth mentioned, this was our 3rd convening, and it actually kicks off year 2 of the United We Learn Council. We set a threshold of having anywhere between 50 to 70 members, and we started off with 75, and that's because we had so many great applicants that it was hard to say no to many of them. So we started off in year 1 with 75 members, and then at the end of the year we asked them to say if they're interested in going on for another year. That took us down to about 50 members. And then we went back to some applications and just areas where we knew we had some gaps in stakeholder representation. And so we invited probably 10 more folks to join as members, and 5 of those accepted. So right now we're at 55 members. We do recognize that we still have a few gaps, so we will likely still be extending invitations to some other folks just to make sure that we have appropriate representation. The chair of our council is Audrey Gilbert. She is a former student from Frankfurt. And then Penny Christian is our vice chair for the council. We have 3 standing committees: the Vibrant Learning Experiences Committee, Accelerating Innovation, especially in regard to assessment and accountability, and Building a Bold New Future with Communities. And Building a Bold New Future is primarily focused on policy, whereas Vibrant Learning Experiences is really focused on what's happening in the schools to make a student's experience vibrant. So how is it different than a sit and get kind of experience? I'm going to turn it over to Penny, and she is going to kind of walk you through what we did in this last convening. And let me point out before I turn it over to her, in the first year, it was primarily the members getting a hold on what it is that we're asking of them. It was a learning journey, a lot of discovering of what's going on in schools in Kentucky. So going into year 2, we really wanted to focus on nailing down a vision for this council and a plan for the next 3 years. So with that, I will go ahead and turn it over to Penny.
Thank you, Karen. Good morning, everyone. So our convenings are they're always very intense and passionate. And this one is no different. This one was no different. Karen mentioned the 3 committees. So the first thing we did, we had committee time. We had those committees share out from the last convening in April to now, the work that they had been doing, right? So that share out was, we had a committee rep, usually the chair, but we had a representative talk about the work that had been done, how the meetings were going, just basic updates on how the committee work was going. As always, and we try to make sure that this happens, our committees are microcosms of the council, right? So we're talking bottom up in terms of what this work is. So the grunt work, I hate to say it like that, but I'm on one of the committees, so I can say that sometimes it is. You really have to, the committee work can be grunge work. And, Karen talked about that first year of getting our footing and really making sure we knew what it is our purpose was. So those committees would share out. And it was very insightful. And we noticed a lot of overlap, as we always do, in terms of the overall council. When we have committee work, we notice a lot of overlap, which means we're probably on the right track, right? So then our moonshot, what the heck's moonshot? So our council's vision, right? It's the main target. Karen mentioned that three-year plan. What is our moonshot going to be? What is that one target that's going to get us where we need to be to really see systemic change in not just education, but assessment and accountability? That was an intense conversation, because the moonshot, when you have so many stakeholders from so many areas, right, and they have so many hats, everyone's priority can actually seem a little different, right? We all know what we want what the end game is in terms of equitable education in Kentucky and all of the things that we say we want. But I come as a family member, as a parent. We have superintendents, we have principals, we have students, we have teachers, we have community members. And at the end of the day, when we talk about the moonshot, and we noticed this when we were brainstorming, our hats tended to come out in what we were talking about. But when we came together, we realized, again, that overlap happened, and the moonshot that conversation ended up being much more productive and effective. So if you've ever done a journey mapping activity, journey mapping, what we did, we stayed in our committee groups, we stayed in our committees. And Karen, I may ask you to jump in here just to talk about the model that the council did before we broke into the journey mapping. This was designed to look at, from day one to now, where have we been, what have we done, and what was that experience like? So you want to jump in on that, Karen?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, we basically put up a timeline. We used Butcher Block, and we put this just huge piece of paper up on a wall, put a timeline up there, and then ask everybody. And in this case, we started with our leadership team because we modeled it for all of the other members. And we just thought about what were some of the events or some of the deliverables that have already been created. And so on cards, we put that on the timeline in a chronological order. And then we asked everybody to rate their engagement during that particular time period. So over on the left-hand side, we had at the very top a smiley face and at the very bottom a frown face. Okay. And so it was like, okay, either yes, I was very highly engaged, so I'm up here by the smiley face, or wasn't so engaged during this, or wasn't feeling it, just wasn't connecting with it. So when you look at it, and everybody does this for every single one of the events of the cards that were put up there, and you start to see a pattern sometimes where a lot of engagement during certain things and really low engagement during other things. Or it just could be that certain people were kind of one-offs. You know, most people were here, but maybe somebody was off there. So what it tells us is, you know, what are the kinds of things what are we doing that do tend to engage our members the most? And at an individual level, where do my skills fit to where I am best engaged? And so then we turned it over to the council members in their committees, and they did the same activities. Is that good, Penny?
Yeah, that's perfect. Yeah, appreciate it. So as a result of this journey mapping, we really, the leadership team, they were really good at reading the room. We knew that this had to happen, right? Just based on some feedback from committee times, committee meetings, and just basically when we asked people if they wanted to re-up and come back, what trends we started to see. So the journey mapping was very effective enough that we had that committee time to try and debrief from what we saw, right? Like I said, I'm vibrant learning. So there were some activities. We had what we called field trips. We went to some schools across the Commonwealth that people identified and said they had vibrant learning experiences going on, right? So that would have been a high point for us. Some of the other stuff would have been attendance. That you have these blocks of time because you meet monthly. You have these 2 or 3 month periods of time where attendance maybe at your committee meetings wasn't so great. Right, so engagement was low. So all of this was mapped. So we were able to come back in our committees and say, okay, what can we do better? What resonated with you enough that we either need to change, we need to step up, or we need to keep it the same, and we're doing exactly what we need to do. All right, next. Okay, so Friday, working groups. Now these working groups are not our regular committee groups. Working groups, we spent a lot of time that morning discussing partially what happened the day before and how we identified these working groups, and also based on the work that came out of the committees. The working groups were designed to, you could choose your working group based on your passion and your purpose, right? So we had working groups that were designed to break up and really do some intense, work, right? The working groups, and I'll tell you what those are in a second. The working groups were designed to get to a more cellular, visceral level so we can identify how can we get to the moonshot. And when you see the names of the working groups, you'll see that these were things that are all integral portions. Integral, if we talk about a cell, and we have the nucleus and we have the protons and the electrons, all these things were necessary to go from the cellular level upwards, right? Which is, of course, if you talk about that atom, or if you talk about that, once we get to the organ or the system, we're talking about the moonshot. And that was what the working group was. I was in the moonshot working group, actually. And that was, I won't say hard, it was challenging. And again, because we come with so many hats and we all think, guys, we want to change the world, right? The United We Learn Council wants to fix everything right now, and education will be perfect next Monday. Right. So sometimes we get it can be distracting when you know what you want to have happen, but then you start thinking about the barriers and the challenges. challenges. And then you come together and all of a sudden it's like, oh my gosh, we've got it. And that's what happened with the working groups. And that went on before lunch. That was the bulk of the morning. And then lunch. And then after lunch was our 1-year celebration. Karen, I'm going to pick on you again because that was your baby. So let's talk about the 1-year celebration, please.
Yeah, so we asked folks just to walk around and talk to each other and acknowledge what successes have we had over the first year. We gave everybody, we had a QR code that was put up on a screen and asked everyone to click on that and enter in some words that would express words of celebration. What have we accomplished in a word or two? And so in a moment, you'll see a Wordle that was put together with all of those words that came out of that activity during the celebration. It was short. We spent maybe 15, 20 minutes doing that in order to create the Wordle.
It was fun. And, oh, Karen, what was the beverage you made?
We had, okay, so Kentucky United We Learn. The acronym is COOL, K-U-W-L. So of course we had to have Kool-Aid.
Yeah, don't mute us. We're sorry. That was bad. Okay, sorry. So after the celebration, our working groups shared out. That was a great time. We had some really effective work that was done, but also the feedback from being able to sit in these groups and focus on the minutia. It came out in the share outs, right? We only had like 5 minutes to share out, but all the information that we received from the moonshot to our charter to everything in between. And what I appreciated about the share outs was you saw the people's passions. You saw that they were really in the group that they were supposed to be in. And at the end of the day, we want our kids to be passionate about what they do in the classroom, right? We want them to find their place. I feel like the working groups allowed that to happen. And we also had embedded in our working groups, we had panelists that were invited. They were in the groups, they were sitting at our tables, and they were invited to, of course, participate and to speak and to share, but a lot of it was observing what we were doing. We saw a lot of note taking by those panelists. And we did give them an opportunity to share out as well. So this is our Wordle. You'll notice that there's donuts is in there, but that's a cool council joke. But when you look at some of these words, you look at coalitions, collaboration, local accountability. That local accountability, that it drives the work of what we do. We talk about being able to have some autonomy in how assessment and accountability looks. So we know that local accountability is always in play. Relationships. Relationships are forged in this room. And it's not just about relationships with the community when you go back, but relationships have to be forged in this room or we don't get this work done. We have to have a lens of empathy. We have to be able to think outside of our own lens, right? And that's where the relationships within the COOL Council come into play. Clarity is important. Can I go back to clarity for 1 second? Karen, I'm sorry. Clarity was brought up a lot because as we talked about that first year, which was finding our footing and really trying to figure out what we're supposed to do, now we're in year 2 and the hard work starts and we have that clarity. We know where we're going. The moonshot gives us clarity, right? Those working groups gave us clarity. So that was a running theme in it as well. Our moonshot, this is our vision. It's a draft because the council has not voted on that yet. But our moonshot is to build a prosperous Kentucky. We will launch an accountability system that is meaningful and useful to all our learners. And there are some words I think we need to focus on. One is prosperous. We know that a lot of this work will not get done if we do not have legislative support. So when we talk about prosperous, we're talking about everything that makes a Kentuckian a happy, safe, healthy, and successful Kentuckian, right? That's where prosperous comes in. We're not just talking about your bank account when we talk about prosperous. right? So we made sure we were intentional about that verbiage. We will launch an accountability system that is meaningful and useful. We talk about meaningful in the terms of we want kids to be in the classroom. Listen, I don't care about algebra. How does a teacher make that meaningful? How does KDE support the teachers to get them to understand that a meaningful relationship to algebra, somehow it factors in. I don't do math, but somehow it factors into careers later on. There are people that tell me that algebra factors in, and useful. When we say useful to all learners, that's the equity piece, right? So when we talk about those EL learners, we talk about that guiding question. Over EL learners now is an indicator, right? So how does this translate into that? Is this going to alter how we address EL learners? Is this going to make EL learners, how do we provide vibrant learning experiences for EL learners just as we would our babies with disabilities or our gen ed kids, right? So that's our moonshot. I'm pretty proud of it. I like it. Vibrant learning experiences. This is our definition, also a draft. We have to vote as a council. It's learning that matters to students, right? In partnership with families and communities, students are agents of their own learning, engaged in relevant, authentic, and joyful learning opportunities. Vibrant learning honors students' cultural wealth, gifts, and interests. Vibrant learning culminates in the application of knowledge and skills demonstrated through personalized products. And I really want to focus on vibrant learning honors students' cultural wealth. This was a big deal when we were talking about how can we make sure this is an inclusive definition. Yes, we want them to learn, but how they learn is based on so much more than a learning style, right? Cultural wealth, their gifts and talents, their culture, all of that impacts how they learn. So my hope is that this definition will be more of a driving force when we look at what vibrant is. Vibrant is not necessarily just, oh, we had a really fun activity and I learned how to make slime, but what did you get out of that, right? And when we talk about our standards, we talk about content, we talk about our standards, is this going to address that issue, or was it just a really fun activity? I personally do not consider vibrant learning experiences just to be fun, but that's my soapbox. But okay, Karen, anything you want to talk about as far as the definition? Okay. So these were our working groups, portraits of a learner. So the question is, what is the Kentucky United We Learn Council's role in supporting the implementation of Portraits of a Learner? That's a huge question. There was a lot of discussion on Portraits of a Learner. A lot of the districts in Commonwealth have it. Fayette County has it's different names. You'll have Portrait of a Graduate or Profile of a Learner or that sort of thing. But at the end of the day, we also realize that portrait of a learner is not just about the graduate. We're talking about pre-K or K through 12, right? Because we know that this begins in elementary school. It actually begins before you ever walk in the door. It begins at home, but pre-K, and how you prepare them, and along the way, how do you get them where they need to be, right? So that when they are in high school, those paths are made clear. Engaging communities. There was a question, how do we ensure diverse representation, which is critical to identifying strategies that serve all students well? There was a lot of conversation about, yes, community is supposed to be at the table, but what does that engagement look like? Rural community engagement looks completely different from urban community engagement, right? So are we doing that effectively? And are we indeed inviting the community into the room and at the table? What does community look like? Are we just talking about the chamber and businesses? Are we talking about faith-based? Are we talking about all of these nonprofits? And Mr. Fletcher mentioned organizations and clubs that we can bring in. How do we do that effectively? So we keep the member engagement at the forefront. Okay, accelerating innovation. System of systems. How do we create an accountability system that includes local innovations through a menu of options? What does that menu look like? Again, small county versus large county, urban versus rural, all of this comes into play. Karen, you want to talk about a system of systems for a second?
If Jennifer Stafford's on, she can probably speak to this better than anybody. I know she's leading that council.
Go for it, Jennifer.
Or that committee. Is Jennifer on?
I am. I'm trying to get my mic unmuted.
I know how it is.
Well, good morning. Good morning, everyone. Penny is right. We have a group that is working on what we call a system of systems. And what that is looking at honoring the local accountability and the really good, innovative practices that are happening at the district and school levels right now. We've got a little bit of a example of a system of systems right now in Kentucky, and that is with our current graduation requirements and how we do that. So if you think about the system of graduation, that we have a state framework, we have the minimum graduation requirements right now. Then so that's the system. Then each local district, the boards of education decides what of their students have to meet and complete in order to receive that graduation diploma from the district. So we have a system, a graduation system that sets the minimum requirements, and then we have the local districts developing their own requirements in order to receive that high school diploma. So that's a system of systems that are at the local level. So what we're looking at right now is how to develop a assessment system or an accountability system that will incorporate those local innovative pieces. So a system of systems design.
What she said. Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you, Penny.
So our council charter, anytime you have an organization that's designed to make change, you need governance, right? You need some sort of documentation, some guiding rules and regulations. So our council charter, what protocols do we establish for the Kentucky United We Learn Council that outlines roles, processes, and procedures while keeping member engagement at the forefront? This is crucial. As I said, we have two drafts. We have our draft definition and we have our draft moonshot that need to be voted on by the council. How does that look? Do we require 50%? Do we require a third? What is it we have to do to make sure that this is fair and democratic and that everyone's voice continues to be heard? So these are some of the quotes from the panelists. Take the time to develop those relationships and inform the policymakers and inform people in your community, because that is going to be essential to coming up with a product that state legislators can work with, right? We did have a representative, and Representative Tipton is a part of the council. So we always have someone in the room who talks about reminding us about the legislative lens, right? Remember I talked about prosperous, it all works together. I won't necessarily read all of these. I know we're probably running short on time. I think that you are honoring unique student experiences. Every district is different and every school is different. So please keep that in mind as you do this work. But using those design principles established by the Accelerating Innovation Committee as what our universal piece is to help continue to honor the differences and uniqueness in our districts is where the work needs to continue to go. See, we're talking about that local accountability yet again, right? It's an overarching theme. That's you, Karen.
Okay, yeah. So just to wrap this up, if you're interested in reading more about what the council is doing or looking at any of the agendas, the minutes, all of our meetings are recorded, even the standing committees, all of their meetings are recorded. So you can always go to our homepage, KDE's homepage, click on that United We Learn in the top right-hand corner. That will take you to the overall United We Learn page. And from there on the left-hand side, you can click on the council's page, and that'll take you to the page you see in the lower right-hand corner there. And you can get to any of those documents there. So finally, next steps, standing committees and working groups will continue working on all of the items that we shared with you today. Leadership is analyzing responses to the feedback from this convening in order to prepare for our next convening, which will be in April of 2024, and that will happen in Frankfurt. And that's all. Happy to take any questions. Sorry, we went a little bit long there.
That's okay. And it's been great to see the progress. Renee Boss has her hand up, so I'll turn it to Renee for a question.
Hi, thank you. I wanted to ask a follow-up question about the vision for the accountability system that group came up with. And maybe that will be addressed in the updates coming now, but just to put it out there. So do I understand correctly that the vision is that all of the Portrait of a Learner work we are doing will eventually be part of the accountability system? So similar to the way we used to have portfolios or something like that? I'm on the deeper learning team and have worked on all the Portrait of Learner work, and it excites me greatly to think that that will matter in accountability. So that's what I'm trying to find out. Thanks.
Jennifer, do you want to? Or I can. Well, okay. So let me just say, I know that at a KDE leadership level, this is something, the Portraits of a Learner, that we have been talking about. We are slowing it down a little bit because there was a proposal that we make that part of graduation requirements. And I know we're kind of pumping the brakes on that a little bit, but that is our hope. But we know that we need to give districts time to understand what all of that means before we go full force with that. Jennifer, what would you add to that?
So what I'd add to that right now is, Renee, thanks for the question. We're in the really idea development phase right now with this local accountability piece, in the fact that these are ideas being generated for discussion. So we had a work group, as Penny mentioned, that supported the idea. Our standing committee, the Accelerating Innovation Standing Committee, which I get to help facilitate, is really looking closely at how we can honor those innovative practices that are happening at the local level. So there's lots of great things happening in our Kentucky schools. Doesn't have to be particularly a portrait of a learner, but it could be. We've got other innovative practices happening that we want to be able to provide a multitude of opportunities that lead to those rich, engaging activities. So I think that we're in the exploration phase right now in idea development, that we're going to continue to seek information from stakeholders as well as the members of the Kentucky United We Learn Council.
Yeah,
Henry, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Genevieve, sorry, this is Thomas. Dr. Stafford and Karen really nailed it. I certainly want to thank our interim commissioner Kenny, and the Kentucky Board of Education. As Dr. Stafford stated, we're really wanting to hear from committees and councils like yours, as well as folks in our local education agencies, teachers, support staff, and superintendents, about what this what a new accountability system could look like. We're not so much concerned about what that name may be, but certainly honoring the work that Karen and her team have really led in helping us to rethink, and of course Rhonda Sims, rethink what an accountability system should look like. And again, as Dr. Stafford said, this is really, and well, it's beyond an exploration stage, but it's certainly because we want to honor the folks who've already been in this space, but really listening to what the community members really want, in the local community members really want in an accountability system, thus honoring the original intent of this work, the vision and mission.
Henry?
Thanks, Annabeth. We've been doing the local accountability system now for about 3 years. We've got about 140 people engaged. So kudos for finally considering giving local communities, boards, the ability to determine some success of their district and schools. But I just want to say about the Portrait of a Graduate, we've been on the Portrait of a Graduate, we've been off the Portrait of a Graduate, so we're back on the Portrait of a Graduate now. We've had a Portrait of a Graduate in our region for 3 or 4 years, 5 years. We've developed here, we've got things in place. But committees are great. And I thank you all for the update. Just a lot of great, sounds like there's a lot of great feedback occurring across the state. That's wonderful. But just because something's good doesn't mean we have to start requiring it for a graduate. So I would just caution you all to really think about how you would really require the portrait of a graduate to be implemented in a school district, while at the same time we're talking about allowing local districts to have more autonomy. So if a district wants to do that, we can do that. We can do that tomorrow. So I'd just be cautious about, because that's so subjective. A lot of those areas are so subjective. I just think you're going to run into a lot of challenges with trying to require a portrait of a graduate for a kid to graduate.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for the great work.
Yeah, Henry,
Thank you.
That's the exact purpose of the interim commissioner and the work Karen Dodd and her team are doing. And obviously here at KD is actually listening to it. And again, Karen talked about the pumping of brakes. It's really, really to honor the work, Henry, you and your folks have done, but again, not use this term mandate to let this grow organically. What you will, yeah, and thanks for the thumbs up. What you will hear asked of you, asked of your colleagues, what can we do to really help this process continue to grow throughout the Commonwealth, without even having a mandate, that we all understand how important these local assessments are. Miguel Cardona, our Secretary of Education, has found the first Secretary of Education that I have had a chance to meet and know that's really open to local accountability systems and state accountability systems, different from the federal government requirements.
Well, I'm sorry, but I just have one last comment about that. I just want to remind everybody involved on this call and every meeting I've ever been in, correct me if I'm wrong, but the only federal mandates, they're very minimal. We take the federal mandates and expand them quite exponentially. I think it's around reading and math, if I'm not mistaken. So there are a lot of room there for some local accountability, and I'll hush, get off. Thank you all for your work.
Sure.
Okay, well, we appreciate the comments, and I think Penny and Karen, you can see everybody's very passionate about the work you're doing. And I have two local members of my teaching and learning team on the United We Learn Council, and I'd love to hear their updates as well. So we appreciate you coming to our committee. We're fortunate to have Interim Commissioner Robin Kinney on for a couple more minutes, who wanted to bring us some greetings. So Interim Commissioner, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, Chair Francis. It's a pleasure to be with you all. My apologies for not joining at the top of your meeting. Sometimes when you come into a position from a former position, your calendar is not your own for a little while. And so I am still trying to juggle a lot of calendar obligations. I hope that for our next SCAAC meeting, I can be here at the beginning and stay till the end. So first of all, let me thank you for your service to SCAAC and the work that the important work you're doing. It's a really exciting time to be a member of SCAAC as well as a member of the education community. As we just, I got to hear most of the report out from Karen and Penny on the COOL Council and the work that they have been doing. This work is the right work to do, but it's probably more necessary than ever right now. Changing the way that students learn and the learning experience for them after we've come out of a period of COVID, and just the challenges that are facing our local school districts right now. We have I think we all thought once COVID went away, we would have students just come back into our doors, eager and excited to learn. And unfortunately, through lots of reasons many reasons that are not their fault, we find ourselves in a very different environment than even before COVID. So it's going to take our collective efforts to make schools a very engaging, welcoming, and inviting place for our students, a place where learning does matter to them. And so that's a lot of the work of the COOL Council. I appreciate very much the words of Dr. Webb encouraging us when we talk about portraits of a learner, what that means. Local accountability is something that it sounds like everyone is now open to hearing about. So that's a very positive thing. Of course, we still have federal requirements and state legislative requirements. So a lot of changes would have to happen through those paths. But I am encouraged as I listen to the words of the Cool Council members, and as we go to other advisory council members, that there seems to be this wave of people really wanting to jump on and kind of ride this. So that's very encouraging. A little bit about my background, just so you'll know where I came from and how I got to the place I am right now. I have been at the Department of Education for about 13 years total, in two different what I call tours of duty. Most recently, 8 years in the Office of Finance and Operations. And so that office, we worked very hard to kind of eliminate barriers to districts and to the department in operational finance and logistics, so that people can really focus on the instruction and learning side of delivery to our students and staff. And so I've had the pleasure of working alongside a lot of your presenters that are on today, and know that they are very passionate about what they do, with the best interest of students always at the center of their conversations. So I am learning along the way. I can remember way back when I first came to KDE, it was the first time, this was in like 20 years ago. My first introduction was into what is a psychometrician. And that's probably something that you all are familiar with in your roles. But just understanding the vernacular, understanding the different words that come along with the importance of assessment and accountability. So I look forward to working with you on SCAAC and appreciate it. If you ever have any questions for me, please don't hesitate to reach out and ask. We are here to service all members of the community, the public, and our local school districts, and most importantly, students. So I'm happy to take any questions if you have time. I know you still have things on your agenda, so I'm going to kind of pop off, and I'll stay on and listen to as much as I can, because the next part is assessment and accountability. So I always learn whenever I hear from Rhonda and Jennifer. Thank you very much for allowing me to just pop in and introduce myself.
Well, thank you for stepping up and doing some great work and keeping Kentucky moving forward. We really appreciate that. So as mentioned, we now have Rhonda Sims and Jennifer Stafford, who are going to give us some updates on assessment and accountability. And while we do this, just think of they're going to be really sharing some highlights and challenges of communicating and understanding Kentucky's newest version of accountability. And it looks like Jennifer is on, so I'll turn it over to her.
Good morning. Thank you very much. Really enjoy the conversation about the new proposals and moving forward with the Kentucky United We Learn Council. Rhonda unfortunately had a medical appointment that she needed to exit for, so she sends her regards and ask that I, along with Helen Jones, do the update for you today. So thank you all very much for the previous conversation about future accountability system and all the innovative things that could possibly happen long term. And so for now, what we have is the newest accountability system that is actually being implemented within the state due to changes from 2020. We, as you may recall, we've talked several times with the SCAAC members about the changes brought about by Senate Bill 158 during the 2020 legislative session. That bill made changes to the accountability system that are just now being implemented. So it's taken time. It has been in development. It hasn't been in process. And because of the changes, literally the change element that is incorporated, we need 2 years of an accountability system to fully implement the system. And during the 22-23 school year, we finally got to that second year for implementation. So the question that we have for you today is about the communications and trainings that you all have provided. You all are leaders in your districts, you're leaders in your community, and we want to know what were some of the highlights and some of the challenges that you had during this time frame where we communicated about the new accountability system. So what are the highlights and what are the challenges that you had as you were trying to train and implement and have people understand, both within your school, your teachers, your administrators, and then your parents and community members, about this new accountability system? So as I mentioned, the new element of change came into the system this year. And with that came another round of implementation of another new accountability system. The system is comprised of many different things that meet both the Every Student Succeeds Act as well as state legislation. So we've got these two laws or multiple laws that are impacting the system that bring together a very complex system. There are pieces that align specifically to federal legislation, and there are pieces that align specifically to state laws and regulations. We intertwine those to make one system, but there are pressures and points that are implemented due to state laws and then others that are due to federal laws. So we had all of these different pieces that come together with levels and weights and numbers and scores, ratings, colors, all of those things with a new accountability system. We really had to be intentional about the terms and terminologies that we use. When communicating about the system, we even developed a little terminology or a little legend that connected those terms. Like, for example, a rating is always a color, a level is always a descriptive word. Weights, they had weights in the system that contributed to an overall score. So each of those, they had different meanings as we were developing the system. With the system, there, again, is federal laws, there's state laws, and in this graphic, what we really tried to do was to demonstrate the areas in which the different laws were being met and utilized in the system. So you can see here on the left, we have the Every Student Succeeds Act, and the federal government is interested in those supports for our lowest performing students or our lowest performing schools. And so when we looked at the system, and you have the identification of our comprehensive support and improvement schools, our targeted support and improvement schools, or our additional targeted and support and improvement schools, those pieces align to that overall accountability score is the federal pieces and the federal elements that are being identified. When you get to the right side, in the colors and the ratings and the dashboard that identify the different indicators and that overall score, those are reporting pieces that are aligned to the state statute and the state laws. So we really try to develop a system that incorporates all of these elements and was both federally compliant as well as state aligned. Looking at the color performance rating, there were indicator ratings and overall ratings. So again, rating is always a color. Rating is always a color. So when we got to the indicator level, and those indicators are around the state assessment results in reading and math, state assessment results in science, social studies, and writing. Penny mentioned earlier the English language progress indicator. There's multiple others like the quality of school climate and safety, and then at high school we have post-secondary and graduation rate. Those two pieces came together and brought together that element of change and status from the current year. So status, we've always reported status, but we just didn't call it that. Senate Bill 158 really brought that term to light. And status is the current year performance. So how schools performed during that current year. So for this 22-23 school year, it was current year performance was 22-23. Change then is the difference between current year performance and the prior year performance. So looking at 22-23 compared to how the schools performed in 21-22. So we needed these additional year of time in order to implement that change element because you needed that comparison to the prior year. So we brought together the indicators and the incorporated the status and change in a 5x5 table. And you can see here how they were brought together. The change, as you can see, had those descriptive words from increased significantly to decreased significantly, and then status was from very low to very high. And again, those descriptive words were levels. And we had the dashboard, which is Helen's going to talk about in a few moments. And those indicators were reported on a dial. So you can see the color indicators for the dials of those ratings. And so those colors give an overall impression of kind of where the school is performing for that particular indicator. Doesn't give you a lot of information, but the power of this system is where and how the school got to that indicator and the overall ratings. Now, the overall ratings were determined by the overall score. And we had a accountability standard setting panel that came together both in June and then again in September that set those performance level cut scores. So when we brought together the overall scores using the weights that were approved by the Kentucky Board of Education, that again are so important to the federal legislation, then that comes together into an overall score. Then we had a accountability standard setting panel that came together. Penny Christensen was on that, and they set what those different cut points are between those different levels. So you can see here in this this middle table that they recommended the cut scores that would take the school's performance from one level to the next. So you can see here that from a red to an orange, they were the ones that recommended where those cut scores were along that continuum. Now, once they made that recommendation, then the Kentucky Department of Education, along with the local superintendent advisory council, did approve those recommendations for those cut scores. And Penny mentioned there was intense discussion, and there was intense discussion during those discussions in that meeting. As you can imagine, there were passionate people in the room, and in the end, they agreed 100% with the recommendation. And that was really powerful when you get everybody in the room on the same page, agreeing to the same cut scores. So that was really a good meeting with a lot of good discussion on that. And then in the school report card, that overall score then that brought all those indicators together was reported on a dial again. Now, with the fact that we have these two systems working together in one, the indicators didn't always line up with where the overall score was. So you couldn't take each of the indicator and the colors on the indicators and equal the overall color rating. So for example, you couldn't take school that was green in reading and math, green in science, social studies, and writing, and then like orange and yellow, and equal a color on the overall performance. The system wasn't designed that way, and because those weights are so different for each of those different indicators. So reading and math always has to have the majority of the system. So that had greater weight to it. So the colors, you couldn't just add the colors up and get your overall rating. It had more influence than that. All right, so the impact of change, because it was impactful, and you can see that how the school performed from one year to the next had a great impact on it. So the standard setters in their recommendations had made it very clear that any positive improvement in the school was to have positive change in that. So it has very significant impact on the indicator. So I've got an example here and these are real schools, real numbers, and real reporting this past fall. So school A on the indicator score, school B on the indicator score, and school C on the indicator score had exactly the same score, 61.2. Their status was a little different score, but they had the overall, the level, the status level was the same. They were all medium status level for this indicator, I want to say, was from reading and math. Their change, however, made the difference in the reporting for this indicator, because you can see that the change was quite different. So the change is, again, the difference between how they performed in the current school year to the prior school year. So for this year, that was, again, 22-23 compared to 21-22. So you can see that for school A, they increased, and their indicator score color rating, was a green. School B just maintained, and they've got an indicator rating of yellow, and school C declined, and their indicator rating was orange. So you can see that there was real impact on the change element when we went to the overall. Now, before we take questions, I'll turn it to Helen, and she's going to give us some updates around the school report card.
Thank you, Jennifer. As Jennifer stated, this was the first full year that we were able to implement the new accountability system. As a result, there were some changes that had to take place as how we reported this out to our schools and districts. And so the school report card actually had to have some modifications or some changes to it, because as Jennifer talked about, we've always reported status, and that's just the current year performance. But this change element really did require that we make some changes in how it was reported in the school report card. So Again, the status is just simply for the overall performance rating on the state indicator. It includes both status and change this year. So remember, status is just that current year. This is how the students did that current year. So that's just, something we've always done. But the change piece is the difference in current year and prior year performance. So we had to have a way of demonstrating what that would look like on the school report card. So you'll see we have those. We have a dashboard. We have the overall performance rating was reported with those 5 color levels, with blue being the highest, and of course, all with red being the lowest, and then green, yellow, and orange were in between. We also reported the indicator performance were displayed on color-coded dials. So you'll see that in the school report card. And the indicator rating was based on the combination of status and change. So that means that we added status, the current year status, plus change to get the indicator performance rating. In addition, we had the indicator was reported with 5 status levels. So those are those descriptive words from very low to very high that Jennifer mentioned. And then the change, of course, is reported using increase significantly all the way to decline significantly. So in the school report card, what you'll see is how schools performed using this rating system. So this is the first time that we've had all of the components to fully implement the new accountability, or the current accountability system. I keep saying new because it is new for us, because this is the full implementation for the accountability system. And with that, okay, we have any questions for us?
Yes. So what we're looking for is what were highlights or challenges for you as you were communicating about this newest accountability system? And I see someone, Robin, or no, I can't see who's raised their hand.
It's Henry.
Henry. Oh, hi, Henry.
Hey, I just want to say thank you all. I think the PowerPoints, the communication was excellent. What we wrote out to our team, I mean, it was step by step. So thank you all. Just great stuff. One area that I would say is the one you've highlighted that has been very difficult for people to understand and grasp is what you just shared with change. When we articulate to people that it's different groups of students to different groups of students, and it has that kind of impact. We have a school in a very similar situation you just described as the orange school there. It's just really hard for staff to understand how that could have that impact. So I think that's going to be one for you going forward, that you're just going to have to continually try to explain how we're doing apples to oranges, but yet it has such an impact. But overall, for us, the communication you all put out was excellent. Thank you.
Henry, I really appreciate that. We have a staff here in the Office of Assessment and Accountability that works very hard to communicate, and I can't give them enough credit. We've got great members of OAA, both on the communication side as well as the data side, that really tries to support our schools and districts, because it is a complicated system. We understand it is a complex system that has many pressure points on it, and that we do see that no system is going to be perfect, but we're trying to implement what we have currently in law.
And
I would echo Henry's comments. I think change is going to be interesting when we look at next year's results. And so we've been doing some analysis and talking to our schools about what it takes to maintain in this new system. And I think Brian Wong said change is a continuous improvement metric. Growth is about looking at individual students. And so you have to kind of switch your thinking some in Kentucky. And it will be interesting when we move forward to see how many how many schools, and I would ask that, I know Katie can do this analysis. This time next year, I would like to know how many schools kept their status the same. I mean, kept their overall performance rating the same. How many went up, how many went down? Because we do know that change, I've described it as either a big push forward or a big yank back potentially. And so I would encourage you all to run the metrics to see what the influence was next year. But it is good to have a system working. And I know we heard from the United We Learn Council that wants to innovate it, but I also believe practitioners really would like to see the system hold for a couple years. Ideally, the system is supposed to hold for 6 years. And so I think we would all like to see that in the schools and actually kind of keep moving in one system and see how things turn out. Other questions for Jennifer or Helen?
Yes, I have a question, Chuck Fletcher. What I'm hearing, and of course I'm gonna look on a different avenue since being a representative for the school board, local school board on the council, but what I'm hearing, excuse me, I don't know why this, what I'm hearing is that the big concerns is what I consider to be alternative assessment for students that has not necessarily a graduation diploma, but students that are alternative students. It seems like I'm hearing that graduation, that if you're looking at increasing graduation rate, that is counted against you. Okay, I think that comes from the federal. I'm not for sure, but I think it's from the federal. That's what I'm hearing. The second thing, if you have a pathway with GED and a student gets his GED, that's counted against you as well as far as part of the graduation count. So I think what I'm thinking is that maybe we need to look at our federal folks to have a better understanding. If a school district is working with students, especially from alternative assessment, and they consider not to be a part of the graduation rate, but only just because of attendance, I have concerns with that. How do you tell a parent that, oh, you're not counted as part of the graduation rate because you got an alternative assessment certificate or attendance? So I think we just need to go back to the feds and as a department, sit down with them and talk to them about what we need to do and helping kids. Our kids, to me, that sounds like you don't count. And we say that everybody is a success story, or we want every student to be a success, but yet you tell the alternative assessment kids, well, you're not a success story. And I think we just need, and I think some of our legislatures don't realize that. They have no idea that this is part of going against graduation rate. So I'm concerned with that. I think we need to go back to the Department, U.S. Department of Education, and say we have concerns with this. I think every child that we teach is very important, from whether they stay 13 years in school or whether they go to 21.
So Chuck, I want to echo, thank you for saying that. I've been saying that for many, many years in this state, and it is a federal issue. But I'm going to give you an example of local accountability. In our district, we have what we call a true graduation rate. We acknowledge those kids as graduates. We have that percentage. Our community is aware of that. We honor the state's percentage too, but I'm going to be honest, we put more emphasis on our true graduation rate. So we have done that locally in our local accountability model, because we've had no luck getting anything done with the feds. Sorry, I have to run.
Thank you, Henry. And Mr. Fletcher, we couldn't agree with you more, because the students that participate in the alternate assessment program, they are working very hard and they are doing everything that they are asked to do. Their parents are supporting the school and their district as well. Anytime that we have the opportunity to advocate for the students participating in that program, we do. at this point to no avail, because there is the federal piece that is very limiting in their definition of graduation rate. All states have to follow the same guidance from the U.S. Department of Education, but we will continue. As Henry has said, we have advocated on their behalf so many times, and we will continue to do so because it is worth it. And these kids are in our hearts and in our minds, and we want them to be celebrated for all the many accomplishments that they are achieving.
And Jennifer, I appreciate that. And any way that we can help, please let us know, because I think it is a federal problem and I think it's a concern. Okay. Thank you all very much for what you do.
Thank you.
Other comments or questions?
So Jen Beth, I do want to, it's not being brought up here, but I do want to mention there is one question that we are getting quite frequently, that if the system moves forward as it is, that what will be the current year next year. So when we go into fall accountability in 2024, okay, so 1 year, let's fast forward 1 year from now, and if the system stays the same, the current year is always the year we are reporting on. So next year, the current year will be the 23-24 school year, and the prior year will be the 22-23 school year. So that seems to be a recurring question. And so I just wanted to share that with this group. So if you get that question, the current year is always the year that we are reporting on in the comparison back to the prior year.
A great way to think about that is we report in fall of the current year on spring current year data. So that's, you know, whatever year you're reporting in, it's been the spring when we've taken those tests. So they didn't mention it during this presentation, but KDE and Pearson did release more released items, and that is a huge win for schools and districts. And we enjoy doing analysis sessions with those and getting teachers and administrators into those because they are valuable resources. Our next SCAAC meeting is scheduled for March 19th. As always, we have one more item, and that is we are still waiting on official updates for the new members. So please, for now, pencil in March 19th until we hear from the governor's office on new appointments. And we appreciate those of you who stayed. You said you wanted to stay, or those of you who said thank you. I did check our November meeting date in 24 is the week before Thanksgiving. And so that should help. And let's see, and I'm trying to check real fast. We have the future meeting dates on the agenda, so make sure you mark those off. I don't think there is anything else unless anyone has any more comments. If not, I would say have a wonderful Thanksgiving, spending time with family and friends, and we'll get back to the work of schools next week. Thank you all.